This is Rudy.
This is Flick.
We are up to episode 60, the big 60 here on the Left of the Dial podcast. We have a real treat for you this week. We actually have several real treats for you. I'm excited because we're doing another installment of the I'm Gonna Make You Love Me series, which are among my favorites to do. But we have even more than that this week, Flick, do we not?
Yeah, we are joined by a friend of the show, Richard Shirk. He, you might know him as the person who wrote, composed, and performed the song that kicks off our show.
Yeah, we love the Time Worm, and we're really lucky that Richard made time to chat music with us. And we talk quite a bit off air too, and it's just one of those things, Flick, where friends you make over music, like you can make friends instantly via music, and once you find somebody who has a music sensibility that you're into, you just know you're dealing with a good person and quality people, and that's Richard's quality people.
Yeah, and we'll be talking to him about his new album and other stuff. We'll be he'll also join us as we talk about the albums that we're discussing on our "I'm Gonna Make You Love Me" segment, which will be Pulp's Different Class and Infotainment Scan by the Fall.
That's up next.
This is episode 60 of the Left of the Dial podcast.
The Time Worm by Richard Shirk. Is that our theme song, Flick?
That is our theme song.
That's an amazing coincidence, because guess who's joining us for the show this week?
Hey, I thought that sounded familiar. I think that was my song called The Time Worm from my new album with Clairvoyance.
Look, Richard, I am corny as they come, but I'm not being corny. We love the song The Time Worm.
Thank you.
We love the album with Clairvoyance. And I'm sorry that when I lived in Oakland, I didn't have a chance to see you play. And I don't live there now, but you do. This is your most recent album from 2020, right? With Clairvoyance?
That's right. Yeah, it's the third part of a 3-album set, which started in 2018 with Midnight Movies. 2019 was Arcadia. And this is the last one in the grouping. It's called With Clairvoyance.
Well, it's cheating a little bit because you and Flick know each other, because you're an Iowa boy like he is, and like I am. We all go back. But one of the things that Flick and I have bonded on from the beginning is, like, we both love artists who love music too, who are insane and crazy loving music the way we are. And you not only can make it, you know this stuff. You're one of us. You're a music fan. Again, I can't say first and foremost, but just in the limited time we've known each other, your creds are considerable. You're a music fan, right? You just can play.
Yeah, and that's how I met a lot of these people that I play with on the record. One of the main guys that who plays drums in the live group, the Richard Shirk group, I met him at a get together in my apartment building, where another friend was like, "Okay, everyone bring 3 records up to my house, up to my apartment." And I met this guy named Dana, and now Dana is one of my main collaborators, a drummer in my band. Another group called the Trash Falcons, which is not musical, but we go down to Lake Merritt and pick up trash.
Nice. That's
so yeah.
Place.
It is, yeah, and yeah, music is really big to me, and everyone that I've ever played music with, we've always met through talking about what we like and talking about bands we like and seeing bands. So yeah, I'm very pleased to be hanging out with you both.
Yeah, well, and that's how Richard and I met way back in the day. We bonded over a mutual love of Elvis Costello. And in particular, an album that I always thought was really underappreciated, Brutal Youth.
Totally, yeah. The first time I met Sean, we were both DJs at KRUI. He had the shift before me, and then I went on to my shift. I had a radio show called The Rock Shandy, which was all rock and roll from the UK, and brought out the big stacks of CDs from my backpack, and on top was Brutal Youth. And he looked at Brutal Youth, and we started talking about how cool the record is, and like This Is Hell and 13 Steps Lead Down, and yeah, here we are 20 years later, and we're still friends. We spent a lot of time together in college, seeing shows, talking about music.
We
seeing
went
Elvis
to see
Costello.
Elvis Costello.
Yeah.
Yeah, we went to see Elvis Costello in Chicago, and then also saw the Pixies when they got back together.
Yeah, and like a dozen other shows. Yeah, we had a good run. I wish we could still do that.
and saw one of the we saw one of what was supposed to be one of the final Guided by Voices shows. It didn't really play out that way, but at the time that was the farewell tour for Guided by Voices.
Oh yeah. Back in the day, that false ending got my heart weeping.
Well, you were doing you had a British specialty show when you were on KRUI, and I mean, again, we are really, corniness aside, like, we're really grateful for the music that you that we get to use, and we wish you nothing but the best of luck. We enjoy the Time Worm, we enjoy the whole album, and we really appreciate you. You're a fan like us, and fans, like, when you make friends over music, those are bonds that last a long time. So while this is our first time working together, you do bring a heavy CV. You've got incredibly heavy bona fides on the British music of this era. And Flick, we didn't really plan for this week to be as British as it is, but this week's topic is our latest installment of the I'm Gonna Make You Love Me series, where each of us picks for the other an album that we would like the other to like more. And we both ended up sort of in the same. We both ended up kind of left of the dial a little bit here. We ended up in the British indie, I don't know, baby pop is the wrong word, but how did we get so British this week? Like, it wasn't really planned, right?
I don't know. I mean, I know that Different Class by Pulp is been one I've been planning on giving you, going back to the beginning of the format.
Yep.
And yeah, it just worked out that these albums fit well together. And it also made sense to have Richard on, when we're talking about stuff, because it's stuff that is in his wheelhouse. And Richard, I want to go back to how you talked about the albums being I mean, would you call it a trilogy? Your three solo albums?
Yeah, I guess you could probably call it that. I just kind of thought that, I was writing all these songs to give you a little bit of backstory. I was in a band called Soft Tags back in the day. We put out records put out 3 or 4 records from between like 2009 and 2011. And then I came down to California to live full time, and was still writing music and still playing music, but didn't really have that same impetus to actually put something out, because I didn't have anyone else in my band, right? So and then, kind of, not to get too like deep, but my dad passed away. My dad always liked to write. He was a newspaper man, but he also liked fiction, and his goal his entire life was to write like a novel, and he sadly never got to do that. And I was like, I should probably get these records out of my head. And so I started recording, and not all the songs fit together. So I had one batch of like kind of spooky tunes about small towns and like wanting to get out of them. And that was my album, Midnight Movies. And then I had all these kind of cool pop songs, like maybe you heard Alarms, or The Goal Keeps Moving Away From Me. Those were kind of some big hits from my 2019 record, Arcadia. And then I had another batch of tunes that were like this, like this late night Halloween vibe. So, like The Time Worm, Greetings from Mount Terror, and The Ephemeron Man, and Old Magic. We're just kind of like these, like, whoa, like I don't know where those came from in my subconscious, but it was somewhere spooky.
I wouldn't have made the literary connection as readily as you just did with your dad. I can definitely see the literary connection in it, but there's like a cinematic storytelling element to it too. You really do. There's a lot of heavy. It's a very narrative process for you. Your songs read that way anyway.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think it's so cool to when you're trying to think about a song to kind of put yourself in that the same kind of place that a screenwriter, a filmmaker would be. Like, I'm not so much about like "Girl, I Like You," "I Really Like You" songs, although I love them by other people.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like in the leadoff track, which is called "We Arm Ourselves with Clairvoyance." Yeah, it's kind of like a flyover of a town where all these things are happening. There's I'm going to quote my own lyrics now. I'm really sorry, but
Yeah.
it's like a shadow passes over the beer-soaked boy, and he's at the midnight movies, and so that's like one part of the kind of view from 5,000 feet as you go over the town.
But it also, you love guitars. That's the thing. Like, again, I think you absolutely have the cinematic point of view and that authorship. But Flick and I both love us some guitars, and I think you like lots of them, like we do.
Oh,
Yeah,
I do. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like your albums have been getting more and more sonically interesting, and a lot more experimental with the guitar, with the sonics you're getting from mainly guitar, but kind of all over the place. So what has been driving that?
I think listening back to my first record, I was mainly just trying to get acoustic takes on tape. I was really out of practice with recording. And then kind of getting my chops back, I guess, a little bit in terms of being comfortable as a guitar player. And because, I'm kind of a hack. Like, I'm okay with that. That's fine. But been getting some chops and then trying to figure out just kind of how to best serve the song. And a lot of the times it's lasers and keyboards. And I'm in my studio right now, and I've got, I think, about a big stack of about 8 keyboards, a lot of which I found in my apartment building's electronic recycling area. And then, yeah, just a bunch of guitars to my left. And one of the coolest little kind of guitar noodles on the record, I think, is on the track Mars 1981. And what sounds like a really cool kind of Johnny Greenwood guitar delay thing is actually the Sputnik ping run through some delay.
That's some science there. See, this is the thing, because like, I don't want to be too reductionist here, and I don't want to pigeonhole or paint your music one way or another. But as much of a scientist that is, there's some you like distortion too. Like, you like the joyful sound, right? It doesn't, you know what I mean? Like, I definitely, and again, I'm totally biased because we're not exactly the same generation, but we both like British music of the same certain vintage. Like,
oh yeah.
You use the word chops, but chops aren't the only thing that like the music fan of that era is going to demand. It's the creativity. It's the willingness to use all the sounds a guitar can make to literally make it to get it slapping. And that's one of the things I picked up early on you is and it's one of the things Flick and I like in all the artists that we love is that you seem to be an omnivore. You seem to be somebody who can pull in and draw in from lots and lots of different stuff, and only a fan can do it as the justice that you're doing it. And again, I'm not trying to paint you as like someone who goes for the distortion end of it, but only a fan of it could possibly replicate it as faithfully as you do. That's my reason.
Wow, thank you. You flatter me, and yeah, I mean, one of the neat things about being kind of, getting a late start on guitar and kind of like having my own style is that I'm not really able to imitate anyone, even if I tried. So like I like I like distortion, and I love keyboards that sound like they're from outer space, and I love making a keyboard make laser noises. and I love reverb. And if you put all those things together and then don't really put a box around what kind of songs you want to write and just kind of let whatever comes out come out, then that's how you end up with a weird kind of late night record like with Clairvoyance.
Well, and are you taking this to the studio, or are you home recording?
Oh, I'm in the studio right now, man. I'm surrounded by weird keyboards and briefcase full of effects pedals, and the keyboard that I use kind of as the desk that my laptop is on right now is was kind of top of the line Yamaha that I found on the free bench in our apartment building. In the mid 90s, it would have cost you some dollars, but not now. It was free. And then I always kind of have microphones on gooseneck mics in this area so I can rock at a moment's notice and get ideas down. So yeah, I've been inside nice studios. I've recorded exactly one song in a real studio, which was Jackpot up in Portland. And that was great, but I love home recording. It gives you so much freedom to explore and to chase ideas as far as you want to chase them without running up the studio bill.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like that, your albums have the sound like you're putting a lot of time in that you don't hear on the album. Like the ideas that end up on wax, as they say, as the kids say, are probably hours and hours of work going into that, just trying to come up with that sort of sound. Is that kind of how it goes?
Yeah, it's doing it and then doing it again until you like what you're doing. And and then just I was pretty ruthless about not having any filler on these records too. So yeah, I'm a big believer when I try and talk other people into being songwriters or writing songs, is that sometimes you have to write like 10 bad songs to get to the good one. And I did that and was pretty ruthless about not letting them really get out there yet until I feel good about it. But yeah, I love home recording because you can, there are tracks on here that I had the basic idea for like years ago when I started this recording project in like late 2016, recording all these albums as a big batch. But then, a day or two before I had to kind of lock the mix, sweating it out in Studio B, which is our coat closet, trying to get the vocals right on just like one little fiddly bit.
Yeah, well, and do the other, like if you write 10 songs to have one, do many of the other songs make it to the recording stage, or are they still on the back burner to that point?
Oh yeah, cool question. I always have things set up at my studio, which I call reclusive studios, so that even if you're sitting here with a guitar and just writing an idea and getting it down on computer, you're recording the rough demo, it still sounds cool enough that you can kind of layer it up and maybe even use it. Like let's see, I think the Ephemeron Man on with Clairvoyance was a song where I was writing it as I was recording it, and then when I was done recording it, I tried to do like, oh, let's do like the proper version of it, and it just never worked the same way. And I went back and only had to make, I think, one little small edit to the song, and I really like that about that tune and some other ones. That there's a real real like electricity, a real immediacy of knowing that you're listening to something that was being recorded as it was being written, and as the the words were just kind of like coming out of someone's mouth. Like, I didn't deliberate over, I didn't have like, my Nick Cave, like, whole wall full of fun, interesting ideas. It just kind of, sometimes things kind of burble up and you got to just press record.
Has the lockdown, or not lockdown, has been the pandemic been a hindrance to your creative process, or has being home like we all are. I'm assuming you are. Has that had any benefit for you in terms of your creativity, or is it stifling, or is there another way it could play out?
Oh, there are a couple different sides of it. One thing, one reason why I was able to get a ton of recording done is that I would always get home probably like 2 or 3 hours before my wife got back from work. So I could just like sing off key and like, get out whatever and embarrass myself. And there was no one around except for our cats. But I think that being in lockdown, and my wife and I have been really strict about it. Let me look at my daily itinerary note card. We're on quarantine day 253. So a lot of really great things about it, mainly about getting the mix right, and having all these people available to contribute to it. Like I said, when we were chatting before the show started, there are 9 different people that play on this record other than myself. And a lot of them, I don't think would have had the time to do it if they weren't also in quarantine. So yeah, that was a big effect. There's a song called McMurdo Station, which is one of the songs that I wrote when quarantine was just starting, and I feel like that was an influence on that tune. McMurdo Station is the science station in Antarctica that many different research institutions use. NASA, JAXA, and ESA, and Roscosmos use it for simulating environments in a theoretical lunar or Martian base because it's so remote. And so it's a song about a lonely astronaut.
Awesome. Would you say, again, just we're all here because we're music fans and we all love live music, and it's a part of your, it's one of your primary channels for your energy, where Flick and I go as fans. What do you think the best thing music lovers can do right now to try to help the artists? I crave a night out so bad. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
I really am confessing I did not appreciate, and I go to a ton of live music and I buy tons of records and I love supporting all of it. But I even though I love it, I did not understand just what an important part of my life that all was. And I worry about losing our venues and losing our artists to the economic realities around us. What do you think the best thing is that folks who just, and again, I know there's lots of people hurting and they may not have money, but for those who have been able to keep their jobs, for example, during this time period and love music, what do you think some of the best things people can do to try to support artists and keep the community together during this period? It's rough on everybody, but this is a part of our national life, our cultural identity that I really feel is at risk if we're not proactive about preserving it. And I do think there's it's not just me who misses this stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And for people, I have a day job and I've been fortunate enough to keep it. And I remind myself of that often and try not to take it for granted. And there's so many people out there that are full-time musicians that are really hurting. And there are, in my opinion, there are a bunch of different ways to help out that I've been trying to actively, be mindful of. If you see a musician that is having a live stream, we've seen some very good at-home concerts from people like Laura Veers from Hamilton Lighthouser, my buddy Dan Frechette and Donnie Boone, who's a folk artist and does music full-time. Try and participate in those and be generous with the tip money. If you see independent artists that are putting out new records, you should really be buying a lot of vinyl in this time of emergency. And sometimes you can make those purchases really count towards someone's livelihood. And so that's also a great way to help out. One link that I have from my Spotify homepage is to the Recording Academy of America has a relief fund called Music Cares. You can set up either a one-time or monthly donation for, any amount really. And yeah, so I'm just a guy in a weird part of my apartment with keyboards and guitars writing songs. But yeah, I definitely encourage people to uh, take that side of this crisis seriously and try and keep your favorite venues open and try and keep your favorite full-time artists afloat, like pretty much any way you can. So those are good ways. Bandcamp is another great way to find people that are independently releasing music, and that revenue in most cases goes primarily to them.
That's really important. Again, the music industry has been filled with potential snares for artists for as long as there's been a music industry, but I feel like this is the first time we've ever really been faced with artists have always, maybe they don't make a ton at radio, maybe they don't make a ton at retail, maybe they make it in the live realm. A lot of the a lot viable, economically viable as artists. I just feel like almost all of those have some sort of choke point or something which makes it really difficult for any artist to rely on it, and we don't want our appreciation of these things to be based on what it feels like after they're gone. You know what I mean? Like it's much easier for us to preserve these things than to start over again, and it feels like we're in danger if we don't deliberately act that we're going to lose stuff that we can't replace. It's not a great time for that.
Very well said. Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah, and Richard, you mentioned your Spotify page. Obviously for streaming, you have a Bandcamp page. What if somebody wants to get your albums on CD? Where do they go?
You can go to Amazon. You can go to CD Baby. You can go to Bandcamp. But pretty much, if you really want a copy of my record, go to my Bandcamp and get in touch with me, and I'll send you one for free because I love you.
Nice.
Wow. Okay. I hope you're not inundated with that because
Flick, you're assuming that you can become inundated with such requests from our show, and I love your optimism.
Yeah, I know.
No, I got a great, probably the first fan mail I've gotten in a while from this young person in Portland, and they'd stumbled on the Bandcamp for Soft Tags, my old band, and was asking, do you guys play anymore? Like, well, we broke up 10 years ago, but give me your mailing address. And yeah, so I, put together like this box of like, groovy, Arcadia on vinyl. And yeah, I love my fans. Anyone that gives me it's just like a pleasure to be part of someone's, everyday listening that they do at home, that they appreciate my record. It means so much to me that, yeah, totally hit me up. I'll send you a CD. No problem.
Do you still keep the old soft tag stuff in your set lists and so on?
Yeah, a couple of those tunes are so hard to get rid of. I just love playing them so much, and they came from such a weird, not dark, but like deep place. Like I was talking about recording and some things just kind of leap out of your mouth, and I feel like those songs are really true, and have a lot of power, a lot of staying power with me. There's one tune called Lunar Eclipse Song that I still I can't get rid of it because it's such a weird, interesting tune, and I love playing it, and I just don't know how it came out of my brain.
I think my two favorites from that era, the soft tags era, we'll call it, Many Hands and Cut the Right Wire.
Oh yeah, those are really fun songs. I love those tunes. Thank you.
Those songs are especially like, because correct me if I'm wrong, but I taught you some chords way back in the day, right?
Yeah, totally. We were hanging out in that place on Market Street that Molly and I lived in, and I think we were kind of like fooling around with trying to play ABBA songs because I love ABBA, and
We all do.
yeah, and yeah, I think you were showing me some chords. So thank you. You made it happen, man.
Yeah, well, it's just when I heard those songs, I remember it's just like, yeah, I taught that guy some chords, and
Yeah, you did.
know,
Yeah,
and now he's doing this.
Yeah, and so many people play that role along the way, and I appreciate all of them. Like, you taught me chords. My buddy Dr. Chad would listen to, demos on tape. Molly Hackett, who I was roommates with for a long time and still pals with. She would let me borrow her guitar anytime and go down to the Ped Mall in Iowa City and play, Buddy Holly tunes and people would like throw quarters into the case. And yeah, and then my wife Suze is a pal from college, and has always been so patient and played on all the records. She's has a huge part in that tune Many Hands. So yeah, everyone's helped me out so much, and I always try and help people out in return.
Have you recorded your favorite song, or is it personal?
Oh yeah, my favorite song. I think if I had to pick my favorite song right now, it would probably be from the latest record. And I think whenever I put out a record, and if I were to be asked that again, I'd be like, "Oh, it's on the latest record." But going back to our,
that's a good answer.
Yeah. I'm kind of like we were talking about Dylan earlier, Bob Dylan,
Yep.
and he's always been like a Excelsior kind of guy, like always forward, and kind of has a hard time being nostalgic. And same thing with me. To a lot of the times, to my detriment, I have a really hard time being nostalgic, and I think that was really a problem with having a live band going with Soft Tags. Is at any one point, I think I only liked about 12 of our songs, even though we had like 70 songs. So, yep.
Definitely proud to say that that I taught you chords, and it led to that.
It did directly.
Well, I'm not making any claims of any sort of direct influence, but
oh no, yeah, totally, yeah, you can claim that. Yeah, I believe in that. I think that without all those things that I just talked about, like we wouldn't. I mean, maybe we'd be talking about music, but maybe I wouldn't be talking about my latest album, which is currently climbing the charts in your latest your local college radio station.
Well, it's on the top of our charts. I know we've been I've been over the top about it, but we do thank you very much for the use of it. It's an enjoyable part of our show. It really is. I enjoy it.
My pleasure.
Yeah, and again, the album is with Clairvoyance. I have to apologize. I've been when we intro our shows, I've been saying the Clairvoyant instead of the actual title, which is with Clairvoyance. So that's what you want to look for, Richard Shirk with Clairvoyance on CD. No vinyl on this one, right?
I kind of took the temperature with putting out my last album, Arcadia, on vinyl, on beautiful blue vinyl, just exquisite. Everything about it. I love that record. I love how it looks, love how it sounds. But I was kind of taking the temperature with putting out an actual record. It's something that I've always wanted to do, and I love everyone that's listened to it. But commercially, the temperature was pretty cold.
That's tough. It'll change. Things will change.
Yeah, there will be an anniversary edition at some point.
Yes, a super deluxe.
But if you want to have a copy of that record, get in touch with me, or it's on Bandcamp too. I just reduced the price from $10 to $8 for the super limited colored vinyl, and it's a limited edition of 300, of which I think I only have about 30 left.
Well, with Clairvoyance is still available on CD at Amazon right now. I'm looking; it's in my cart.
Oh, cool! Thank you.
So we're definitely. I would say Richard's very generous for offering to share his music with y'all. If there's any way for you to not take him up on it and just hit up the old Amazon or CD Baby and put a little in the pocket here, and you'll be doing a mitzvah for sure. So it's still there. It's still in stock.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we're very happy to have Richard here. As I know from our college days, Richard knows a thing or two about British rock and roll music, and that's basically the basis of our show to on this podcast.
Yeah, we went really British this week, but Flick, you and I are not Anglophiles, but neither of us have any problem code switching between the American indie and British indie. I think we're both true believers to like 9-10 digits out. So we're all in a comfortable area, I think, here. Mid-90s, British indie, I think that's within all of our wheelhouses.
Oh, yes, please.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
So we didn't pick who's going to go first. Flick, I genuinely don't care. You can go first if you want to talk the fall. By the way, I'm just super excited because Richard's a fall fan, and I know you are too, Flick. Finding 3 fall fans on the same podcast at the same time.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, I like the fall, but the reason why you gave me this album this week is because, I have a tight pocket with the fall, which is the early work. So yeah, this is I guess where I get my feet wet with the '90s stuff of Marky Smith. I'm totally wired and company.
We'll say I'm. I do think prime fall is in. There is some prime fall in the '90s, but it is definitely different than the '70s for sure.
Can I suggest that there was a prime fall for a brief period in the aughts as well, with Real New Fall LP, Fall Heads Roll, and Reformation post TLC?
I would agree with that. I think you can you can safely purchase the compilation 50,000 Fall Fans Can't Be Wrong because it in thousands, and it does grab from Country on the Click. I'm not sure if it gets the. I agree with you. There was definitely, he has spots throughout all of his career, but he does have some dead spots too. I feel like I picked Infotainment Scan. I do think it's the best '90s records of theirs. It was like a comeback record. I think it was on Matador, and which for them was I think was distributed by Atlantic at the time, which would have been as close to major label money as Marky Smith ever got. But it was seen as kind of a comeback album in its time. I do think it stands out in their catalog. But Flick, I'm gonna leave it to you here. How you feel about it?
Yeah, well, okay, so yeah, I mean, we've talked about Marky Smith. Another, really underappreciated part of the fall, I think, is Steve Hanley, the bass player. I think to me he's just as much worth the price of admission, and a lot of great work from him on this album, I would say.
Yeah, this is towards the what I think of as sort of like one of the great fall lineups where he does still have some of the original lineup, like Brixie Smith's not on here, but Craig Scanlon.
Yeah. Yes, please.
Simon Wollstonecraft's on this, I think, as well. So this is definitely one. I'm sure this band could bring it in person. There's no way this band couldn't play. No way.
Yeah, and I don't know. I like we just discussed, I have some gaps in my fall listening, in my fall catalog, which makes it sound like something you get from Sears. But yeah, some gaps there, and so I don't know. This on this album, there seems to be more of Marky Smith trying to do actual singing, which I think it kind of works, but also it's a little bit sort of, it kind of depends on what mood you're in, where I think it could really hit you wrong. But I think in general, Marky Smith can hit. So like, I'm sure some people listen to that and it's just not for them. But yeah, I mean, I happen to like him, like not only does he generally not sing in any conventional way, he doesn't really he doesn't really do poetry either. I mean, it's just, like hardly anything he ever says rhymes.
I don't know if it's even all written down, and I hope it never all was, because again, it does work as stream of too. Like he's too smart probably, or maybe just left the tape rolling, but it's not poetry. I agree with you, but every once in a while it reads like it, or he delivers
Yeah.
it like it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it works. There's something really effective about the way he does or did things, and it's certainly not going to work for anybody. But like I guess maybe people listening because again this is very England centric, a very England centric show. May not really know the Fall, and I'm not sure totally what to compare them to. To me, they're a little bit like the Hold Steady. If you want like an American comparison, they're a little bit like the Hold Steady in the early days, or I guess if you're talking early Hold Steady, maybe Lifter Polar. But that's one comparison that comes to mind.
Pavement fan should be a Fall fan.
Possibly, yeah. I think there's a bit of a difference. Like Pavement songs are often very hooky, and I don't know that Fall songs are hooky, but I don't know. But one thing that we've already talked about this a little bit off air. There are songs on here. It's very fitting that this is coupled with the Pulp album because album or songs like Lost in Music and I'm Going to Spain.
Yeah.
I was saying this earlier to you guys that if Pulp covered those songs and you didn't know that they were Fall songs, you would just assume that they're Pulp originals. You wouldn't think anything about it. Like there's definitely a comparison there too.
I totally agree with that. And, I was listening to this album again for the first time in a while. And yeah, I found a lot of the tunes to be like more pop hits than I remembered. Like,
Mm-hmm.
especially if you put it in context, this album came out in, what did I say, like 93. And so there's a tune on there called Service, which totally has like this great like Manchester thing going on. And this, the kind of dated but awesome
Right.
keyboards and
Right.
a beat that you can dance to, and then Past Gone Mad I think is kind of like a great blueprint for a band like Gorillaz, where you have
Yeah.
this groove and you have cool keyboards, and then you have kind of like this spoken component to it, and uh, and then we also talked about the whether or not Glamrock is referencing Suede, which is obviously debatable because you guys
Sure.
have done your Wikipedia research. But yeah, it's definitely of the moment. And some of the things that I found out about the record in doing the research for being on Left of the Dial is this album actually charted really high for the band. I see that it charted number 9 in the UK, which is their highest chart position. And then like a bunch of the guys in the Fall at this time were being headhunted by some of the big like Britpop bands. So word on the street is that Elastica tried to steal Craig Scanlon from this lineup.
Mm.
And then they did steal Dave Bush, who plays keyboards on this record. He ends up playing Elastica.
I did not know that. This album for me does stick out in the Falls catalog because it's not that they were ever avoiding synths, and I don't think they ever like deliberate like, oh, this is a synth record. Marky Smith writes a lot of great guitar songs, and almost all of his really good covers are always like big hooky old like 50s rockabilly stuff, and he's a music nut. He loved like the Monks and all these like real nugget style things. Like he absolutely can bring the heat with the guitar driven stuff. But I really do think this record stands out in the Fall catalog where they weren't over the top with the keyboards, but like you said, it's very much of its time. They showed that they could do this thing pretty well for a band who doesn't normally do this sort of thing. I do think it stands out a little bit, and I'm not trying to diss Marky Smith. I love Marky Smith. I feel like they were trying pretty hard here. You know what I mean? Like this was not one of those albums where he just improvised on the microphone while the band riffed for 20 minutes. Like He really there's songcraft here, even though a lot of them are covers, but there is songcraft here, and he spent the real time putting into it to make it a cohesive, real fall album, and I do think they succeeded. I definitely feel like they succeeded.
Okay, so I do like this album, but I do have to say I have a song that is a favorite, by a country mile, as the kids say.
Mm-hmm.
And do you care to guess what it is?
I can guess. I can tell you what it should be, but I can't tell you what it is. Yeah.
Well, okay, then tell me what it should be.
It should be Glam Racket.
Okay, well, it is.
Yes, yes, yes. I know my man.
I mean, I'm totally a sucker for that sort of thing. Like that song, if nothing else, that song is like, I mean, that song is already like a top tier fall song for me. That's an instant winner.
I'm not gonna try to talk you off the ledge on this one because it's great.
Yeah.
And again, it's not all poetry, but Why Don't You Bug Off Back to Xanadu in Ireland is one of his greatest, like, of all the nastiness that's ever dripped off his tongue, to just be like, why don't you bug off back to Xanadu in Ireland, is one of my favorites. It really lands. It just hits different.
I don't yet have the impression worked up from anything to do with this album, but I will have to work one up for Glam Racket. But for now, it's just the Totally Wired one.
Well, you're good at that. I'm really glad to hear that. And whether or not it's making fun of Suede or not, Suede were great. They did not require Marky Smith's affirmation. If you don't like the first couple Suede records, I would suggest you just don't like rock music. There's nothing to complain about, certainly on the first Suede record. I think it was the music press stuff. He's just an old curmudgeon, and he needed song material, and they were as ripe a target as anybody else, right?
Yeah, well, and this is why he's fun to imitate. By the way, though, I do have a new impression that I worked on earlier today, just a little bit. You want to hear it?
Yes.
You start a conversation, you can't even finish it.
David Byrne.
Correct. Ding, ding, ding. You didn't phrase it in the form of a question, but you're still correct.
Okay. Yeah. I'm new here. I don't know all the rules.
That's right.
I'm not sure if Glam Racket was a single or not. I suspect if it wasn't, it should have been. The only claim to fame here on Glam Racket is when I moved to San Francisco in the mid '90s, one of my roommates came in and asked me, because I was sort of the music nerd of the house. They asked, "What is glam? What music is glam? Like, I read about glam. What is it?" I'm like, "Oh, do you know Rock and Roll Part 2 by Gary Glitter?" Like, "Oh, kind of." I'm like, okay. I played the glam record. Go ahead.
In the current context, that isn't a good example, but I guess technically that is kind of a textbook example of what glam music is.
Like the Sweets, Desolation Boulevard to me is probably as close to a glam masterpiece as ever was done, except by David Bowie.
What about Electric Warrior by T-Rex?
Yeah, or The Slider.
And The Slider, yeah.
Yeah, you're right. But those are real. Yeah, you're right.
Mark Bolan had two masterpieces, and yeah, I mean, I agree about Desolation Boulevard, but it's not even close to the only one. You got Mott the Hoople too.
True.
I guess we're gonna have to explore glam more on this show, apparently.
Well, I played Glam Racket for my roommate, and she's like, "Oh yeah, I know that kind of music," and it's very, very effective there. Here, it's sort of doing a parody of just that gigantic, over the top, it's drums primarily. He can't beat Glam Racket. You just can't. It also, because he mumbles so well, you get that rich experience of trying to understand what he's even saying, and then when you hear it, you're like, oh, that's genius. He really packed a lot into 3 minutes.
Yeah, but I'm kind of stuck on this other thing now, because you didn't. What about Slade?
Oh, come on, Slade albums? Really?
Well, yeah. So maybe not masterpieces, but
it's probably the template for glam. Like if you're trying to teach at the School of Rock, I think you could hand somebody Slade's greatest hits, and that'd be a respectable call.
Yeah. I mean, but anyway,
Although
it's
my oh my, can't have. Yeah, you got Run Run Away and My Oh My. You got to include those, and those are not glam. But anyway, I am
well,
glad you
no,
picked Glam Record Flick.
yeah, Glam Rackets. I don't know. I would have thought that would have been kind of the predictable favorite for me too, just because of everything about it musically.
It's music about music. It's exactly as meta as we what we like. Same with I'm Going to Spain. I'm Going to Spain is a cover of a song that apparently was like the British entry into the Eurovision contest in like 1976. It wasn't particularly beloved in its time, but
Oh
I'm Going to
yes.
Spain is one of these like just Marky Smith pulls the best covers out of obscurity I mean it. I don't think you can make this album without I'm Going to Spain.
I just had a vision, Rudy, of Marky Smith sings Eurovision.
Oh my God, are you telling me you wouldn't? I'd get up at any hour if I knew he was on. I'd
I,
love that.
I can see the record cover in my mind. It's wow. I wish he would have made that record. It would have had Claque de Doigts by Serge on there, probably, and some ABBA.
But he loved all that. That's the best thing about Marky Smith is even though he's this like curmudgeon and he's this sort of he's unhappy. His public image is to just be grouchy about everything. He loved music, like music.
Yeah.
The centerpiece of his life. It gave his life energy and meaning, and he was a great lover of music. And every one of the Fall records, even the ones that aren't great records, those only could be made by somebody who genuinely loves the music. And the fact that he put together a string of really good covers on this record, I also think distinguishes it. I do.
To jump back in coming from the musician side, it's hard to keep a band together. And if you're Marky Smith, and it's probably like doubly hard to keep a band together.
Yeah.
So the fact that the Fall, a lot of bands, they lose like their like Craig Scanlon, and then the band breaks up, right?
Yeah.
But the Fall kept going, and despite like all odds, because you kind of blew my mind when you're like, oh well, what does the Fall sound like? There's no other band that sounds like the Fall. They're so weird and awesome at the same time. But
Yes.
yeah, to keep either firing everybody or having them quit on you, and then being like, okay, well, we're not going to stop. We're going to put out a record like in 3 months. He must music to be able to get through that. Yeah.
Can I ask, just from an artistic point of view, you've been in a band and you've been a solo artist. I've always believed that creative tension sometimes within a band can bring out the best in certain artists. Like, I do think Prince didn't need the revolution to be great, but the revolution brought some stuff out in Prince that he wasn't going to get otherwise. The Beatles, too, when they broke up, their solo records were really more an expression of the stuff that they weren't going to put through the Beatles sort of the idiom, and that's fine. But I also think the Beatles also sort of greatly benefited from a little internal competition, a little creative tension. Like Johnny Marr, when he was in the Smiths' prime, used to write a song a day. You know what I mean? Like there was just there's a tension within a band when there's more than one voice that a solo artist I don't think has to deal with. Marky Smith treated his band like it was a solo project, though. He was able to do both. I guess I should ask an actual real question, which is just: do you actually is Marky Smith just a solo artist where a rotating cast of people come in and out, or were the Fall a real band? I actually think they were a real band. This lineup would be one of them. I would say was a real band.
Yeah, and especially obviously when Brix was in the band. But I'm not. I've read the McMiddles with Marky Smith Fall biography, which is really excellent. I recommend it to anybody. But I'm having kind of trouble remembering like how their songwriting process worked, because you've got to have the Marky Smith and like play acoustic guitar and then bring in the demos. He had a couple different lineups that have this amazing rhythm section. I think a lot of the Fall songs kind of start out that way. Well, so yeah, it's really collaborative.
Yeah, just the way it sounds, and like I trust my ears above all else, but just what my ears tell me, is that Marky Smith, the stuff that he was doing, because as we're talking, it isn't, he wasn't writing poetry. He wasn't as Richard said, bringing in the demos or bringing in an acoustic guitar and then conveying it to the rest of the band. It seems like he's really feeding off of what they're doing, and that's inspiring what he's doing vocally.
Yep. Yeah, they definitely had a tension among them as a group, which had ultimately broke them up, but they were able to get an incredible amount of great music out of each other that way. You know what I mean? Like, that's the trade-off, isn't it? Like,
yeah.
they clearly hated each other.
By the way, though, can I get someone to second me on the love for Steve Hanley?
Oh yeah, man. Yeah.
Yeah, I think he was or is a great bass player.
Yeah, I mean, if you were to have the best people from all the different lineups of the fall, Hanley, Wollstonecraft, Scanlon, for me.
Yeah, the heavy hand of Mr. Wollstonecraft on this album. Like, that's why Glam Racket is great. There are snippets of the demo that are just sort of recorded on some condensed mic somewhere with a drum machine. And I understand, like, you can definitely hear the song. You can definitely see he was onto something when it was just him. But that heavy hand of the drums on Glam Racket basically sell the whole thing hard.
Yeah, and some of my favorite fall records have that backbeat. It's built on the backbeat. Like I'm thinking about Sparta FC from Fall Heads Roll. Yeah, there's another one like that, and a lot of if memory serves, on Hex Induction Hour they have 2 drummers at the time, which is really cool.
What's the song on commercial? Not Mountain Energy. It's early 2000s. That's all drum driven too. I was glad to see Marky Smith get paid. Come on, he deserved that money. Totally. Mr. Flick, there are many versions of this album, like there are with many fall albums. I'm not sure which album you heard, but did you happen to hear his cover of Lee Perry's "Why Are People Grudgeful"? Was that on the version you listened to? It's a bonus track on the reissue.
Yeah, I don't think
on the first one.
Yeah, I don't think so. And my focus, I did listen to some extra stuff, but my focus was really on the 10 songs that were released.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm nominate Marky Smith for the first ballot Hall of Fame covers artist. He's a master of covers, and Lost in Music, I'm Going to Spain, and Why Are People Grudgeful, I think, are 3 of the best he's done. And they did them all in the same session. So that's another reason I think this album stands out in their catalog.
I definitely, I'm sure I did hear the version of Why Are People Grudgeful, but probably just the one time.
It's good stuff. The only other song I was going to go rabbit hunting for a story on, and again, I love it, but I think it's kind of a shameless nick of New Year's Day by U2 is It's a Curse. It's a Curse is really propelled basically by the instrumental backing track of New Year's Day, at least to my ears. They sound very similar, but it is great. I don't think it was a single, but it is one of their better late period cuts in my humble estimation.
That's pretty punk rock to do that.
Well, see, I have a pet theory that the Edge from U2 has always been a closet Keith Levine fan from the early Public Image Limited records.
Yeah.
I've always felt like Bullet the Blue Sky to me sounds very similar to like Banging the Door from Flowers of Romance by Public Image. I definitely have always felt like Edge was a closet Pill fan, but I also think deep down Marky Smith is an Edge fan. I just do.
You can still talk to one of those guys, and if you see, I'm kind of a U2 apologist. So if you see interviews with the Edge, he's another guy who's just a legit enthusiast about music and knows a lot more indie stuff than you might assume from some of their kind of like cheeseball stuff.
Yeah, they can't help it that they broke big. Like, you know what I mean? Like they made good like indie records until they weren't indie anymore.
Well, the question I would have for the Edge is, he has a lot of downtime. There's no question that he has a lot of downtime, because how often does U2 put out an album? So he should have like another band, shouldn't he?
There was briefly that project with Brian Eno called I think The Passengers.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I see the Edge as being a guy who has a guitar laboratory, and I think he's down. I guess it would be a laboratory for him.
Yes.
And I feel like he's down in that guitar bunker pretty
Or
often.
would it be a laboratory?
You make a good point, Richard. Like, think of how many albums he's done where he's basically brought out like a new guitar sound that defines that album. Like, most artists are lucky to find one signature guitar song in their entire life, that they milk it. He basically figured out how to pull that out for almost every record. There's almost always something new he's doing. He must be in the lab. He must be.
What I like about him too is that he is very upfront with that, and also being like, it's just a simple riff. I think the documentary is called It Might Get Loud. I don't know if you gentlemen have seen that.
Yeah, I saw that.
Where you have Jack White and I think whoever else,
Jimmy Page.
Jimmy Page, yeah, obviously. Yeah. And Jack White shows up with like a resonator guitar, and Jimmy Page shows up with like his Les Paul and a stomp box, and then the Edge shows up. They show his effects kit, and it's a guy on a forklift driving this pallet down this like mysterious warehouse corridor. And during the taping of the documentary, he's like, well, okay, well, this is the riff for, I think the song is called like Get Your Boots On or something. And it's just, he plays it on an acoustic guitar. It's like cha-chunka, chunka, chunka. But then he puts it through his like giant cube of every cool guitar effect, just like meticulously dialed in and customized. And it sounds massive, and it sounds like a hook.
This is a sad story, and I'm not trying to bring the house down with this one, but when I went to see Billy Idol on the Whiplash Smile tour, I didn't think Whiplash Smile was all that great, and I stand by that, by the way. It's half good. But I went because the opening act was The Cult. And I was there to see The Cult because I loved the album Love, and then they put out Electric, which I didn't love as much. I do now, but at the time, and it wouldn't have mattered. The Cult was coming to mighty Cedar Rapids, downtown Cedar Rapids.
Yeah.
In between the sets, so The Cult plays, I'm on cloud nine. I got to see The Cult like in their early prime. Very exciting. The guitar tech for Steve Stevens comes out, and he just barely touches the guitar, and it plays that incredible little intro to White Wedding, the it just touched the guitar, and it came out fully formed, and I've never been more heartbroken that it was a pre-recorded effect, and that Steve Stevens really wasn't gonna ride that string down to kick off White Wedding. Nothing hurts more than knowing that was pre-done. That said, is there a better use of YouTube than, I don't even know who does it, but there's the videos where they go through like a guitarist's all their guitars with their guitar tech. Like,
whoa, no way.
Is it Guitar World or I don't know what magazine does it. That's the best thing on the internet. When they go through each guitar, like, oh, Angus likes to play this one on Back in Black, but he definitely doesn't use it on For Those About to Rock. Like, those are the best videos of all time. I could watch them all day. I don't think Marquis Smith ever did one. I'd watch that. So, Flick, my usual criteria, Richard, is whether or not a song that Flick gives me or an album that he gives me, do any of those songs end up in my actual playlists that I actually listen to on my own? So if Flick gives me an album where songs make it, that to me is the excitement.
Oh, that's a high bar. Wow.
It is a high bar. Flick, did I meet that bar with this album? Is there anything from this album that's going to survive?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I let the cat out of the bag early because I think Glam Racket is actually like a top tier fall song for me. So yeah, there you go. That alone. And yeah, I mean, there's a bit of there's other stuff I like on here well enough. It is a good fall album.
Richard, did bringing this album out of mothballs for you rekindle any love that you'd forgotten about?
Totally. Yeah, I went through a big fall phase. I remember being so excited when the Peel Sessions box set came out. and going down to Music Millennium on Northwest 23rd in Portland and getting that, and yeah, early days of getting into the fall, it's like getting into Guided by Voices, where there's just so much to learn, and so many different little like groupings of records. And I think when I was first hanging out with Sean back in Iowa City in the aughts, big albums for me were like Live at the Witch Trials and Light User Syndrome and some of those kind of things. And yeah, right. You kind of get lost with the mid 90s. There's the Marshall Suite and Curious Orange, but like no big like standout records. And this one was really fun. This was a standout record for me that I had not given the amount of time that it really deserved back in the day, and it really brought me back.
It's not the last great fall album, maybe. It's probably my favorite last. It's like the last album of theirs that I like go back to and really can end to end get into. They had great songs all the way up until the end. I just felt like this does stand out in their career in that like a lot of the great post-punk bands had kind of run out of steam, weren't putting out great albums. And for the fall in the middle of the early 90s, when independent music is really becoming mainstream, for them to be able to compete and really bring out an album that was worthy of their stature, during that time, I really think that points to it's one of the reasons Marky Smith is great, is that he never rested on his laurels. He always brought new ideas. They didn't always work, but he was capable, like 20 years into his career, pulling an ace out, which that's a pretty rare thing. That's a hard thing to do. I really admire it.
Well said. By the way, a good game. Okay, Richard, you just mentioned the box set for the complete fall Peel sessions.
Yes, sir.
Okay, are you familiar with the set, Rudy?
I don't own it, but I've listened to some of it. Yeah.
Okay, so let's play over under. What we're going for is the number of CDs that are in the complete Peel sessions box set.
Oh.
Okay, so I'm going to set the over-under at 5.
Over. I'll take the over.
Okay, yeah. I guess it wasn't that hard of a game. It's 6. 6 discs.
Look, I think you mentioned it, Richard, is like telling somebody where to start in the fall catalog is kind of like a no-win thing. You can't please any fall fan because you're always going to pick the wrong one. There's no like right answer. But among the answers that are more right, I would put Infotainment Scan. Like if somebody starts with this record with the fall, it's not necessarily representative of what they'll get elsewhere, but it does let them know what they're in for. And if they like it, it will only get better from there. That's my read anyway.
Yeah, right on. And I think that it's really representative of mid-period fall. I think if I had to pick a couple other records, I think Grotesque would be representative of like mid to late 80s fall, and then Live at the Witch Trials for their punk rock roots.
Yeah. Middle Class Revolt and Cerebral Caustic, the two that came after this, I can't say they're as good, but they do have some bangers on there. Like if you playing around any of the albums that are referenced on the fall compilation, 50,000 Fall Fans Can't Be Wrong, any album referenced by that compilation, you're going to find at least a few bangers. At least a few. Good times. Anything else, Mr. Flick? I can, because I feel like I'm here feeling some love in the room. I don't know if I made you love it, but I do feel like I've impacted your music life.
Yeah, I mean, I love is a strong word. I definitely like it. Trying to think of another game here because we got on the subject, got on the subject of John Peel. I saw a documentary. I don't know if anybody's ever seen this, but they were just discussing 45s that were in this box that John Peel had stashed away. Seemingly that, if there was a fire, he was going to just grab this box and just save those records.
Yes.
And I was going to try and think of a guessing game with this, but I can't think of a guessing game, so I'll just say what the big record was. Morning Train by Sheena Easton was among those.
Oh, I was gonna guess. I was like, Sean, I already know the answer to this. It's obviously the song that they played at his funeral.
Oh, you're talking about Teenage Kicks?
Teenage Kicks by the Undertones. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure that was in there also, but that's pretty predictable. That's on his gravestone. But
It is a great record, by the way, and it did deserve to be played multiple times in a row.
what, Morning Train?
No, yes, yes. Although you know what, I'm not ashamed of liking Sheena Easton, and because you know what, Sean, you've already come out and said you don't think you got the look as big a banger as I do. So we're off on this topic altogether. If you're not going to Sheena Easton's honor, then somebody has to, and that's going to be me.
Yeah, if there's a Sheena Easton banger, though, I don't think it's Morning Train.
It's Sugar Walls because Prince wrote it.
Yeah, Sugar Walls is a decent enough song.
I think you need to go watch the video for Strut, I think it is, because you know who her tour keyboardist was.
Both of those are better songs than Morning Train. The Morning Train thing is a head scratcher.
Bruce Hornsby plays keyboards on the Strut video, if I'm not mistaken, and he couldn't look more uncomfortable singing along. Please go give it a look. Before we get too far from John Peel, he is also responsible, I think, for most of the world knowing who the White Stripes are, and I count that among his virtues.
And there were a lot of White Stripes records in that collection too, but then also Sheena Easton's Morning Train.
Well, and you can say that about so many cool bands. The famous story about Billy Bragg hearing that John Peel was saying, "Oh, I'm having a good time playing records, but I'm kind of hungry," and Billy Bragg shows up with all this Indian takeout food, and he's like, "Here's my tape," and going back to our glam talk, our glam chat, his early
our glam racket,
just glam in general, his championship of Mark Bolan, when John Peel is still off on the Radio Caroline ship, no one knew who Mark Bolan, Tyrannosaurus Rex was until John Peel made that happen. So yeah, a million bands like that.
Yeah. And
what a guy.
America never had a John Peel, right? America has never had a singular tastemaker for alternative rock. What, maybe Lester Bangs was close, kind of, but not.
Yeah, really. That's maybe our equivalent, but not like a DJ that I can think of. Matt Pinfield, maybe.
The old KROQ stuff from the early 80s, maybe some of those guys, Richard Blade, but he was British too. So, I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah.
I'd say Alan Freed, arguably.
True.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's the thing. You can go back to that era, and I think then you have something. But in later eras, I don't know that anybody ever listened to something because I don't know. I don't know.
Rodney
Bingham.
Over at K-Rock. Yeah.
Okay. On a national level, though.
Not really. We really don't have. Dick Clark was not a tastemaker. He was not. Yeah, he was sort of like he was just a presenter, an announcer.
Whoever booked those Ed Sullivan spots for Elvis and the Beatles, but
yes. By default,
well,
yes.
And you know what else? Johnny Cash, because when he had a TV show, look what he did with it.
You're right.
If you look at the Johnny Cash TV show, that's basically what he was doing.
I don't know. I mean, Britain's a smaller country. It's an island. There's plenty of reasons why it's probably easier to have a singular tastemaker there than it is here. You know what I mean?
State-controlled radio where you only have 4 stations for a really long time if you don't count the pirates.
Yeah, but let's just be honest. How lucky we are that John Peel was their tastemaker, and he really had taste.
Oh, he was. What a guy! Yeah, I love that guy.
Yeah, a lot of the music that I love, I don't think exists if he doesn't champion it at some point when there was no incentive to do so. Right? He really did. He really did use his power for good, for the most part.
And yeah, to that point, he spent an almost impossible amount of time listening to stuff because I think he really felt that was his mission too. I think, he's somebody who probably felt guilty that he didn't have more time to listen to stuff because he felt like it was kind of his duty.
Yeah. He had 26,000 albums in his record collection. I don't think I've touched 26,000 albums.
So this is how British this show is, that we're even talking about John Peel for a good amount of time. Like we're all in. We're all in on it.
Too cheesy on the transition here, but on different class, while it is extraordinarily British, I'm not surprised that three young men who were living in Iowa in the early 90s, not surprised you guys found this record. I knew common people, but at this time I was not listening to as much music as I took a little break. So I don't know the 90s stuff as well, but I went to high school in Cedar Rapids, Iowa at a time when Motley Crue was at their peak, Def Leppard was at their peak. Like there was the hair metal stuff of the mid 80s. It was a little alienating to be a music fan if you didn't like that kind of stuff. And I feel like that vibe is all over this record of just being a part of a culture. Pulp is very British. This album is very British, but just sort of feeling out of sorts with it a little bit. You know what I mean? Like feeling like, you're going to have a hard time finding too much better a kickoff for an album than Misshapes. It's not really a concept album, I guess. I don't think you could call this a concept album, but kicking off, you pretty much know where you're going. You pretty much have an idea of the perspective of the band. I don't think it could be much clearer than the lyrics for Misshapes, right?
Totally. Yeah. Well, and that really spoke to me a lot. I think I first heard this in high school. And in Misshapes, there's that line about, if you don't fit in, you're going to get a smack in the mouth. And I went to a really small high school, and I can attest to the truth of that. So
yeah,
it really spoke to me.
Wearing a Cure T-shirt in mid '80s Iowa was not a way to get invited to parties. Talking about Smith's records wasn't going to get you dates then or now. Actually, no.
Another thing about that song too is it really is nerd power. It really takes the idea of the kid who knows too much and makes it sort of empowering.
You know what? I thought a lot about that, and I don't want to turn this into a sociological thing, but back then, I don't think people understood that Revenge of the Nerds is a joke, but that's actually what's about to happen, right? The sort of the old meathead alpha male construct really died its death sort of in the 80s and the 90s. And once technology sort of took over as the driver of culture, that sort of outsider culture that this album represents actually ended up becoming quite mainstream. Not just maybe not in Britain necessarily, although to some degree, I think. So, Richard, this is a complicated thing because I do have to. I meant to start by giving Flick has been making the case that Different Class is actually a Brit pop album, and I've never really heard it that way. And I'd say that is probably my biggest takeaway is that that's exactly what it is. It really is that, but it doesn't have that sort of lad culture about it that an Oasis might have. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's just a little too considerate.
Yeah, Pulp was definitely Jarvis Cocker was definitely his own person. He was an iconoclast, as the kids say. I'm just gonna keep on throwing that out.
It makes you sound hip.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Because if the kids are listening, they're like, "Oh, we say that."
They're gonna start.
Maybe they don't now, but they will start perhaps.
But again, at the time, this album really was sort of a counterpunch, right, to the dominant culture. This is outsider art in a way, which is really hard to think of it that way now. But in its time, it really was.
Yeah, well, I think that's the whole idea behind Misshapes and Common People is, Common People. The story goes that that was somebody that Jarvis Cocker went to college with, and just basically that was his snap back at that sort of attitude that somebody had that he knew.
But by this point, even though I don't think the first 3 Pulp records are as good as this, and I think you could make a case, and I'm trying to remember what the name of the album is right after this by the.
Well, the one right before this is a good one too.
So before is His and Hers, and after this is Hardcore.
I'm not a huge Pulp fan. I do think This Is Hardcore is also pretty close to All Killer No Filler. Is that not the common wisdom? Is that
I like it, but it's, to me it has the we wrote this in the studio kind of thing going on. I think that, so just to take us back, the history of Pulp, Pulp and the Fall formed pretty much around the same time. So the Fall gets together in like 76, I think, and Pulp starts in 78 when Jarvis is like 15. So they've had a long time to gestate, right? And they had kind of, like the Fall had kind of their different, very delineated eras. So does Pulp. So they have these like very kind of like C86 sounding songs, and they have their kind of like concept record called Freaks, which is like really weird. These are on Fire Records, I think. But yeah, then they kind of grow up, and the lineup solidifies, and yeah, His and Hers, Different Class, and This Is Hardcore. I think His and Hers and Different Class are like pretty much one record that got separated into 2 batches. So this is like their best stuff, them as adults, coming off of all their experience and being in like the right place at the right time, and just having Jarvis as your front man is, wow, what a golden opportunity. Because I've seen him live. We saw him live 2 years ago, and the charisma that he projects out of a room is just, it's mind-numbing. He's got it.
Yeah, he's definitely one of the great all-time British frontmen for sure.
Yeah, and I would say His and Hers is really good. Like, to me, that's where they definitely started to take off, and then I think Different Classes where it goes into the stratosphere.
Yeah, I do. To your point, Richard, like I do associate them. Like, do you remember like the Soup Dragons or like Primal Scream? Their first couple records are so unlike who they became, and I do think Pulp's a little bit that way too. The first couple Pulp records, I don't remember them making much of an impression on me at the time. Certainly not as much as this album ended up doing.
Yeah, they took their time, and I think they're another band that broke up a bunch of times, and you have some people that were with the band the entire way. And if you look at the number of people that were in Pulp, it's almost as long as the number of people that were in the Fall.
Yeah, you're probably right about that. I will defer, but I would guess you're right about that. So, Richard, I've read somewhere, and I can't remember where, but like musicians, if you're in a band, you have a huge batch of songs that you get to pick from to make your first album. If it succeeds, you're going to be pressured very quickly to come up with your second album. Maybe have some stuff left over from the first time. Maybe you throw some stuff together, maybe not. But they say that by the time the band makes their third album, they've done nothing but like record and tour. And that's why these bands all end up singing songs about, the road, Home Sweet Home by Motley Crue. It's their third album. By the time you've made your third album, all you have left in your life to sing about is like Turn the Page, Home Sweet Home, We're an American Band,
It's the second week in a row now you've referenced Home Sweet Home as an example of how things are.
So yeah, I think that, yeah, if you're putting in that much time on the road, you're trying to write it, sound check, and trying to write like in the back of the bus, and that kind of stuff kind of seeps into your brain and comes out your mouth when you try and write a song.
I do think that is what's behind this record. And by the way, Sean, Flick, I am not at all going to apologize for, if you don't like Home Sweet Home, what am I supposed to do for you? Really? Anyway.
I mean, in one breath, you're talking about how it was like when growing up, when everybody was into hair metal and you weren't, and then you're using Home Sweet Home as an example of, this is how music works.
That's a tribal thing. I could not code switch from being like a Smiths fan wearing thrifted clothes to being a credible fan of theater of Theater of Pain. Like, there's just no way in 1985 or 86 to code switch like that. I can now. Anyway, neither here nor there. I mentioned this only because do either of you play Grand Theft Auto by chance?
No.
I used to in college. Yeah.
Okay, have you ever played GTA 5? Do you understand how, like...
No.
Okay,
That's
sometimes when you steal a car, the car you steal is playing a radio station, and there's all sorts of radio stations. One of them is like a psychology self-help talk radio station, and one of the commercials they play while you're driving around the lobby there on GTA 5, the narrator asks the question, what's the difference between you and a sex addict? And the answer is opportunity, right? Now, it's a bit of a played off as a bit of a joke in GTA 5, but I really did get that vibe here from this record and the one before it. Like, by this point, Pulp was a big enough band that Jarvis Cocker was a star. Now, this album made him a much, much bigger star, but if you listen to the lyrics all the way through here, it's not just misshaped. I actually think the best way to enjoy this album is to read the lyrics as you go along, because I don't think American ears in particular realize just how good lyrically the album is. But he really is at this point, and Pencil Skirt, I actually think is, I mean, it's kind of a little nasty. You know what I mean? Like this thing he has here, and Common People is the same theme too, of just sort of like, by this point, Jarvis Cocker, he probably has had years where he pretty much could have any sexual encounter for the asking, right? Like,
yeah, but you know what though, Rudy, you're assessing it that he was a big star, but I think it goes back to what Richard was talking about. He's an incredible, charismatic, guy. I think that's really what it stems from, like his ability, with the opposite sex. I think was due to his charisma more so than his star status.
I was reading about the formation of the band, and Jarvis was a rock star when he was 15 and like selling fish at a fish market. And everyone was just like, this guy is a pop star, but he's selling fish. And so that's how the band kind of coalesced around his buddies, who was just like, we got to harness his power. And yeah, the lyrics are totally smutty and like in all sorts of different ways. There's that lyric, I think, in I Spy about how he's doing all these things with this guy's wife, but he wants the guy to come home like while they're doing it, which is just perverse and interesting.
That's exactly my point. That's
Yeah.
exactly. And I also think Pencil Skirt is got a little of that energy on it too. Well, I mean, what the lyrics from Misshapes, I think, literally come out and say, like, revenge is going to be ours. I'm going to find the exact lyric. There won't be fighting in the street. They think they've got us beat, but revenge is going to be so okay. Like, he was never a nerd, so you can't call this Revenge of the Nerds. But this is literally like he's just walking through, like, what's the other lyric? He's pretty. We want the things you won't allow us. It's the best. Misshapes is one of the best kickoff songs for an album. Like, it doesn't foreshadow everything, but it in a way it sort of does. Like, I'm not sure every element of Misshapes is that sort of sexual passive aggressiveness, like the David Lee Roth thing, where when I saw David Lee Roth at the 5 Seasons Center, somebody threw something at him. He said, "Yeah, throw it at me, but I'm gonna F your girlfriend after the show, man." There's a little of that energy here, pretty much from the go on Different Class.
Yeah. The whole thing hangs together thematically, and yeah, it's about, I think you're talking about with being kind of, guys from Iowa getting into this record. Like, why do you like it? Well, I mean, all the guys from Pulp are from Leeds, and it's their scene, and they go to, if they go down to London, they're like the equivalent of like Midwestern guys going to New York. And
the underdog thing.
Yeah, the underdog. Yeah, and the the everyman, and yeah, totally cool that it all hangs together like that. And he's not. It's not hanging together in a small town way like Bruce Springsteen is.
Right.
I like Bruce a lot. I know you guys like Bruce, but in this, he's like, it's okay to be like smutty and dangerous and really sexual about articulating their kind of like small town vibe.
Yeah, I mean, Misshapes is definitely an underdog anthem, as is Common People. I think those two songs are very tied together in that underdog sort of lower class sort of, we're gonna rise up sort of theme.
But let's come on. I'm not ashamed of being American, but let's be honest. When the British are doing their class, when class surfaces in British music, it's so much more artfully done than here. Here you get John Cougar Mellencamp. You know what I mean?
Well,
multi bar band crap about Johnny got laid off at the factory. Even the Springsteen stuff, like it's really corny boilerplate stuff. This is really interesting. The class arguments that they make.
I don't want a side argument. I don't think Springsteen is corny. Mellencamp, sure, but I'll go to the map for Springsteen.
And I just want to step in with some props to Mick Ronson for his role in Jack and Diane.
Well, there you go, Richard. You even might be turning me around on that. I didn't even know Mick Ronson had anything to do with that, but
yeah, check out the new documentary. I believe it's called Beside Bowie. A lot of it deals with Mick Ronson's career after being in the Spiders from Mars, which includes a lot of really surprising stuff, like working with Mellencamp and working with Tina Turner. So little side note there.
Well, and as you might remember, I have a big soft spot for Mick Ronson. That's my favorite collaborator Bowie ever had.
Yeah, he was really great, and you'll love him even more if you watch this doc. Years and years ago, I had kind of an acquaintanceship with his daughter Lisa. We played with her band one of the times that we played in New York in Soft Tags, and really sweet person, and yeah, Mick Ronson was a genius, and his influence carries forward beyond Bowie over to like the Iggy Pop records, over to Transformer by Lou Reed. So yeah, really unsung person.
Very unsung, yeah.
And I'm going to throw in Your Arsenal by Morrissey.
Of course. How could I neglect that? That's Morrissey's best record. Such a cool record.
Yeah, and it needed Mick Ronson really bad, I think, to pull it off. I don't know. Maybe it's because none of us come from Britain. I enjoy the record shopping there very much, and I've never had a bad time there. If you told me we were going tomorrow, I'd be super excited and go. Like I will just from afar. Just a kid sitting in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, whose only real connection to the outside world was going to be college radio or MTV. You know what I mean? Like, but the Young Ones was big, and maybe I lionized the British music of the British indie of the early '80s and mid '80s too much. But like, if you're going to get working class music from Britain or America, I think this Pulp album in particular makes the case you want it from Britain. Like, if you're going to buy blue collar music, buy it from Britain. It really is better.
And by the way, not to veer off from this album, but on the topic of Jarvis Cocker and sexuality and where he was, at this point in his career, you go back to His and Hers, and you have the song Babies, which is very much, that's about his exploits as a young man. And they're every bit as perverse or whatever you want to term it as the stuff that's on this album. So I think that was always who he was.
And I think talking about Jarvis as the underdog, I think that one of the best songs he's ever written is Ruling the World. So I don't know if you've heard that. I can't really tell you the lyrics on the air, but it's a hit song, and it's so true that I remember. So my wife Susan and I saw Jarvis play his latest kind of incarnation of his band, which is called Jarv Is. That was in October of 2018 at the Chapel in San Francisco. And to hear him play "Ruling the World" at that show was really powerful. I mean, you don't get that very often. You get the chills. You get frisson, and I've had that when I saw Prince play "Purple Rain." And when Jarvis sang this song, and if you haven't heard it, listeners out there, please do investigate. You'll thank me. You'll thank Jarvis Cocker.
And it's a great opportunity. Jarvis Cocker is on the new Hot Chip song that it's not even out a week or two, called Straight to the Morning, or maybe it's been out forever and I'm just old, but I found it a couple of weeks ago. It's a 2020 release. Jarvis Cocker still has it. Again, I'm not an expert on his career, and he's not necessarily the centerpiece of the performance. Like I love Hot Chip records, no matter who's on them, but he delivers the goods in that one too. He's still this. I think I sent it to you, Flick. This album, Different Classes, I think literally almost to the day, like 25 years ago. 25 years ago, they were on the BBC playing these singles and stuff like that. Not everybody can stay relevant for 25 years, and I do feel like Jarvis Cocker has, right?
Yeah, that's true. It was released at the end of October in 1995, so kind of unintentional that it worked out that way, but nice.
And the time that, it just in context, it's such a great record too, in comparison with some of the other records that came out during that time period, which I think you have, the second or third Oasis record, you have Great Escape by Blur. And none of those albums have really, they weren't as fun for me when they came out, and they definitely haven't aged as well. And what they're trying to say about the middle class British experience is totally laddish, it's kind of a bro thing, and this is such an interesting art school articulation of it.
It does feel like there was a minute there in British music, and I read this online, and I hadn't thought of it this way, but I didn't realize that there was a little bit of heat between Suede and Pulp during that time. But that early 90s, when Suede and Pulp were really making these big albums, British music could have gone a very different direction than it did. And it did sort of get pulled back to the sort of the Oasis, the little more, I don't know if there's a class layer to that. I don't understand British culture well enough to say that, but there was something, it definitely went in a more roguish lad direction than I think Pulp or Suede ever was. Again, Flick, you've been the one who's always been saying this was a Britpop record, and I can definitely hear it. I think it's because Common People doesn't stand out on the album arrangement-wise. It's definitely consistent with the record, but that is the impact song, and that's probably the least Britpop sounding song on there. Would you agree with that?
Well, yeah. I mean, it depends on how you define it as a sound, but it was definitely, there were, I don't know, five singles off of this one in the UK.
Yeah, 4.
Okay, and I mean, they're all, it was definitely in that grouping as far as being in the the I don't know what's the word I'm looking for. I'll go with zeitgeist because I think I'm thinking of a different word, but I'll go with zeitgeist because it definitely was part of that movement. But I think Jarvis Cocker was just his own person to the point where it doesn't necessarily, it doesn't sound like Blur, but then again, Blur doesn't really sound like Oasis, and Oasis doesn't sound like Suede. So none of these bands, exactly. They're not from some sort of cookie cutter, But I think Pulp was definitely its own thing. It was certainly part of the movement, though.
Suede and Pulp were a little bit wink, right? There was a fourth wall for them that they kind of broke a little bit to let everybody in on the thing, right? They weren't pretending about pretending, they were being rock stars. You know what I mean? And I feel like.
And by the way, Supergrass always gets left out of that grouping. So
Supergrass was so good, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just gonna throw in Supergrass because it seems like we should have just mentioned them, or I should have.
Well, anyway, I'm not going to be able to do every song on the album. There really isn't a dud on this record, and I was originally, if we'd done this show last week, I probably would have done a little bit more of a hot take in that. In my first couple reacquaintance listens through this album, I found myself liking the second side, the B side of what the vinyl would have been. The stuff after Live Bed Show, which I'm assuming Something Changed was the first song on the side B of the original record.
It was the CD era, so there kind of is an aside too.
Yeah. But boy, oh boy, those first 4 in a row, or actually through Disco 2000, the first 5 in a row there, you're going to have a hard time finding a record that year that lays it out. Who can string 5 of those together in a row, at least 3 of which are singles?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely prefer the early part of the album myself, and except for, I think there's one definite Pulp classic in the second half of the album.
Can I guess it?
Not more, but what's that?
Can I guess what you're going to say?
Yeah, go ahead.
Is it Feeling Called Love?
It's not.
Oh,
you want to take another one?
No, that was my only one because it's a classic.
Okay, well, I said there could be more than one on the second half, but I think one for me is there's a definite one, and I think
it was a single. It was the last single.
I think it was a single. I believe it was a single.
It was the last of the 4. Is that the one you're picking?
I think it was a single. So go ahead and guess.
Well, it's either Something Changed or Sorted for Ease.
Yeah, Sorted for Ease and was.
You know that song. So I was listening through both of these albums today, and yeah, I think that that's a cool song where, like we were talking about, they kind of set themselves apart from what's going on at the time. You know, like they don't want to be at a rave out in a field with super furry animals. You know.
Although if we had time machines, we'd all go back and do that, wouldn't you? I'd love.
Oh yeah, totally, yeah.
Rave back then.
And yeah, the super furry animals as part of the Britpop thing, as you know, another kind of like outlier. That could be, you know, whole other series of shows, but yeah, like acknowledging, you know, what's going on in their world is a really cool thing about Pulp. Whereas, you know, Suede has this kind of like, you know, Love and Poison, like romantic thing where they don't really talk about, you know, going down to the shop to get some chips, you know.
Yeah.
And then you have, you know, Blur, who's kind of, you know, putting on the like fake Cockney accent, and yeah, it's so much fun just to hear like Pulp kind of do a little bit of a diss track about like Manchester.
A Damon Albarn draft would be a hell of a lot of fun.
Oh, agreed. Yeah, so much to choose from.
Yeah, and Flick is great at making rules so that you can't just jump in and grab most of the first Gorillaz album, which is probably what I would do. But and you love Park Life, right, Flick? That's your big... Yeah.
I think everybody does.
Yeah.
Well,
everybody here at least.
Yeah, and you know the thing about Britpop, for that era, there isn't really much. You know, like there's stuff I like more than others, but there isn't much that I really don't enjoy. Like, you know, I think if you talk about Oasis, you know, most criticisms of Oasis, I think are totally correct. You know, they're not very original. They're cliche. But you know, like those first 2 albums, I don't, you know, like just being reminded of them every now and then, I'll probably put them on for a spin. You know, like I definitely like a lot of stuff more than I like Oasis, but even though, you know, like I think those criticisms are accurate, what Oasis did works. It works for me, and I enjoy, you know, like I pretty much enjoy the whole run of Blur except for maybe Think Tank. Yeah,
you like the first one too?
What's that?
Leisure? You like Leisure?
Yeah.
She's So High's good, but I mean, come on, There's No Other Way is such a shameless Stone Roses bite.
You know, it's like it's their baby band record. It's them getting their feet wet, and Yeah, I mean, they were in like the like baggy scene at the time. So, but yeah, to what Flick is saying about Britpop in general, there's so many cool records that were just these little blips that grazed the chart maybe, and like Moose, I think is one.
Yes.
Supergrass is kind of like a late period thing. Even some of the kind of more rip-off bands like Menswear were still kind of fun, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's really as far as musical movements goes. It has a high hit rate for me anyway.
Just to throw in one little other aside about Moose, their song "Jack" is the greatest shoegaze song no one knows. Just wanted to throw that in there. I really liked this record. I'm not a big fan of 90s indie in particular. This would definitely make a top 20 of the 90s albums for me. I definitely need it. I don't know why I didn't bond with this record in its time. The only two areas I can think to be critical is NME rated it one of the 500 greatest albums of all time, and I'm not sure I'm there. Would you guys put this in the top 500 albums of all time?
It's hard for me to conceive of 500 albums. Like, I would imagine yes, but then when you get down, I think with 500 it has to be in there for me.
And if it's NME, like it's kind of got its own little spectrum, right? It's not Beethoven's Fifth is going to be on it, and
Sure.
maybe like Led Zeppelin isn't going to be on it. So yeah, if you look at, like, I'm looking at my awesome music shelf, and I have the 500 greatest records as picked out by Rolling Stone, and if you have Rolling Stone picking out, you can have everything from things that I don't really think are true, like the Eagles, but then you also have like Prince records
Or John Mellencamp.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. So, but yeah, I think with the Enemy, with their kind of focus on more or less like indie-ish music, yeah, I totally see it in the 500. Yeah,
I definitely top 100 British records. Yeah, I think. Yeah, you're right.
I think, Richard, though, for you personally, though.
It would be, yeah. I mean, if I went through all the records that I know, all the records that I have, yeah, it would make an appearance in there somewhere.
Yeah.
Maybe in like the, I don't know, like 300s or something. But
yeah, I could see it. I could see it being in my 200 somewhere, possibly between 100 and 200 somewhere. I'm not sure.
It depends on my mood that day, though.
Right.
I will end on the point that I think you were referencing a little bit, Mr. Flick. Like, to me, well, you know what? I'm going to go back to a different point, and I don't mean this as a slight, actually, and it's going to sound like it is. It's not. I will give the British 100% front and center on albums about class, because they're just so much better at it than us. I have to say, for an album that is about sex as much as this one is, it doesn't make sex sound as fun as it really is. Like, if I was going to get an album about sex, I probably would take one from Prince at this point over Jarvis Cocker.
Yeah, which I think is kind of cool. Like, it's the like kind of messy and fumbly bits about it, whereas Prince, it's all like, these like kind of scenarios that Prince was probably like drawing pictures of in his notebook when he was 14.
I will say this: I don't think there's a better album about bad sex. It just came to my mind and I said it. I don't even know if I 100% believe it. Let me think about that.
That's like a whole show that we could research.
I can't think of an album that makes bad sex as much of a topic as this one. I can't think of an album that does that that's this good. In fact, I don't think there's an album that presents a sort of complete view of sexuality that's this good.
Well, you know what?
There's some Smiths tunes that kind of touch on it, but yeah, not as a whole album.
But yes, I get it.
If we're going to extend this Prince and Jarvis Cocker comparison, I mean, Prince, the whole Prince thing is kind of unattainable for most people. Yeah. And I think the Jarvis Cocker version of it is definitely more understandable and more relatable.
Yeah, I don't know. There's something about when rock stars sing about sex. It deserves more scrutiny than it usually gets, and I'm not going to dredge up Steely Dan, although I really, really want to here. They also sing quite a bit about fumbling, bad sexual encounters. I'm going to give Pulp the nod even there, too. I think Pulp's better at it than even the mighty Steely Dan. That's a bold statement coming from me. Anyway, thank you, Flick. Again, I didn't offer you an album that starts. I'm not saying the Infotainment Scan is the equivalent of quality of Pulp. I felt like I got to keep you close on this one, Flick, because there's not a lot of people who want to talk about The Fall. You're one of the very few. You found another one, and I'm eternally grateful. So I admit I was being a little selfish because I want to talk about The Fall more than The Fall gets talked about. And the fact that you found some music you like out of that makes me very excited.
It was so great to talk about The Fall with you guys.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think I mean, you probably had a good idea that was going to go over with me. The thing about the Pulp album is I've really been working on you for this one for a while, and so this was where I this is kind of what I'm doing with this format is seizing on the opportunity to pin you down and make you listen to stuff that I've been trying to talk you into for quite a while.
I'm too judgmental, and you do need to keep me honest on those things. I overlooked this one. I shouldn't have. Misshapes and Disco 2000 are going to be heavy rotation for me for months. So, then I knew them at their time, but for some reason I just didn't bond with them. Like, oh, that's more British than I am. Whatever. And then I was wrong. I was wrong. Good time. Have you picked your next album, by the way? Because Richard did mention a category very near and dear to my heart. I don't want to go too British too much in a row, but C86. I've got a few C86 favorites I may try to convert you on. Close Lobsters, my friend. That's going to be a tough one, but I might have to pull that one out. Do we have any rules, Flick, about whether or not we can do greatest hits for like a band like Close Lobsters didn't have enough to have like great album after great album? Could I bring a greatest hits to the party?
Well, I mean, maybe we go back to, because when we started the format, we were doing compilations that we're putting together. So we could maybe go back to compilations, and then you could basically make that greatest hits the basis of your compilation. And I don't know. I know I had another band that I think there was another band on the back burner. I mean, so far I've given you Guided by Voices.
Yeah, that was.
What's that?
That was tasty. I'm down with that.
And Spoon.
Richard, do you know that Flick did not really like Magnetic Fields that much? I don't know if I can remain his friend.
Okay, well, I mean, what are you basing that on, Flick? Because it's another band where really wide range.
Yeah, it's not that I hated it, but
what album?
I made
it was a compilation.
Oh, I think they're like, okay, so I think if you don't like Holiday by Magnetic Fields, I'm not going to say that there's something wrong with you, but I am going to say that that's such a great album that that you're really going to like it if you like the kind of album or the kind of artist that we've been talking about today.
I felt like I had to go heavy on 69 Love Songs because I just felt like it would do a disservice to somebody introducing them to Magnetic Fields without laying on the 69 Love Songs stuff pretty heavy, and it just didn't take.
Yeah, that's too bad. I like their studio stuff. But Magnetic Fields are a really interesting band. I think the first two albums, which are often paired together if you hear them on CD, which are The Wayward Bus and what's the first record?
I can tell you what it looks like because I'm seeing it in my mind right now. But
yeah, so those were written, but Stephen Merritt didn't want to sing them. So he has a woman named, I think her name is Susan Anway, sing them. And they're totally chill, interesting pop songs. And then once he finds his own voice, you have probably about like 3 or 4 really good records to choose from. And then a couple like really sprawling things that you can kind of pick through and get some gold out of. Like 69 Love Songs, I don't think is great from beginning to end, but it isn't supposed to be.
No.
Yeah, like musically, there were some interesting things. It was more lyrically that I didn't enjoy it, but But again, I didn't necessarily dislike it. It just didn't move me that much.
It is a lot of songs about bad sex as well. So maybe that's it.
Yeah, but it was more that it was kind of humor that didn't work for me on a humorous level.
Yeah.
And that was, like if there was really one thing that I could say was an issue for me, it would be that.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll pick new albums. Look. We're not going to run out of albums that we want to force the other one to listen to. We'll get to some. We'll get there. We'll get there.
Yeah.
Maybe not the British next time, but we'll get some.
Just to really quickly loop back to C86 and some of the bands that you were talking about. My friends do a DJ kind of podcasting called The Vinyl Snob, and one of my best buddies in this building is a guy named Gavin, who has like the most rare British 45s
Wow.
you can find, and I think he has DJ'd an entire C86 all vinyl, all 45 show. So Rudy, I can send that over to you somehow.
Please do. That is, I am a big fan of that era, and at the time, no one in the United States I knew was talking about that stuff or really liked that stuff, and I'm so glad that it's gotten a sort of like a critical rethink, and that the kids are digging it. Some of that stuff has come back into print, although very painful that the Mighty Lemon Drops catalog is not all available on Spotify. That's a big source of pain in my life. I gotta fix that somehow. When are they gonna? You know what, Richard? We're going to have to bring you back to talk about the music business at some point, so that we can talk about how albums get put on Spotify or certain songs don't get put on. And others. We definitely want to talk about that with you someday.
Definitely, and I'm kind of second generation music business. So yeah, and anything you want to talk about. My family used to work for Bill Graham and that kind of thing, and it's so complicated and so weird and so arbitrary sometimes what ends up on Spotify and what doesn't. And yeah, just it can change month to month with a lot of artists. It's really interesting.
I want them to get paid, and they don't owe me their music. I don't mean to imply that, but you know that feeling when you're looking for that one song to complete the perfect playlist, and it's shaded out because it's not available. Few things hurt as much as that. It's a very common thing.
That's true. That's why I got to check out Gavin and my buddy Dana's show. It's all out of print weird stuff. You'd love it.
By the way, since we're looping back on things, I want to loop back to John Peel, because as a Liverpool football supporter, I feel like I have to mention that John Peel was also a very huge Liverpool fan, to the point where he named his kids, the middle names for all of his kids were after Liverpool related things. So he had a son, William Robert Anfield. Anfield is the stadium where Liverpool plays. Alexandra Mary Anfield and Florence Victoria Shankly. Shankly was one Liverpool's best manager, basically.
Frankly, Mr. Shankly, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And then Thomas James Dalglish, Kenny Dalglish is either the best or second best Liverpool player ever. So, as a Liverpool fan, I just wanted to mention that.
Did any of them have the middle name Ocean Rain? Because otherwise, they kind of did the best part. Now, didn't he?
Well, related to the football team, not to the Liverpool, the city, and bands that came from the city.
All right. Well, Richard, you're coming back when we do the Echo and the Buddyman show, because I think I found someone else who digs it. So.
Oh, I love Echo so much. Yes, please.
All right, we're locked in. Thanks for coming, Richard. Appreciate you.
It was a pleasure to talk to you both. Flick, we don't talk enough. Rudy, it was great to meet you. Next time you're in Oakland, hit me up. We'll talk nerd.
I'm so into that. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Flick. I got it. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you, Left of the Dial. It's been a real pleasure, and my new album is called With Clairvoyance, available wherever albums are sold on the internet.
and we are hearing the tail end of the Time Worm right now.
All right. Good talking to you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Good talking to you.